At least 7,000 people killed last year and 70% of the army's capabilities under rebel control. As Yemen's political transition failed. Who is in charge of the country? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm David Foster. Welcome to the programme. 2014 was a bleak year for Yemen. The power vacuum left by years of instability has been filled by groups trying now to overthrow the government. Houthi rebels have become the most powerful political group and in recent months have taken control of large parts of the country, including the capital, Sana'a. Elsewhere, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which the US considers the network's most dangerous offshoot, continues to expand its reach. And hopes of fulfilling an agreement that was reached last year to divide the country into a federation of 6 regional states have stalled. Before we talk to our guests, Omar Al-Saleh helps set things up. He is in Sana'a.
The Houthi fighters started their campaign of control since July of last year when they controlled a couple of northern provinces. Then they moved on towards the capital, Sana'a, and by September the same year they controlled the entire capital. From then they moved on to control other provinces southwards. The Houthis now control at least 9 provinces. They feel emboldened by this, all of these military victories and also their rising political power, and they feel they can impose their political will. Also in September last year, the Houthis signed something called the Peace and Partnership Agreement. That agreement stipulated to give more powers and political representation for the Houthi movement. In return, they would have to disarm and withdraw from the capital and go back to their stronghold of Sada. Well, that never happened. The Houthis now are retracting on items they agreed on with other political parties in the national dialogue. That was a conference held, backed by the UN and organized by the UN to oversee the transitional period after toppling President Saleh in 2012. The Houthis now are the kingmakers of this country and they feel emboldened. However, there are alliances which help the Houthis achieve all of these political and military victories. If those alliances change, the Houthis could lose some of their power. Omar Saleh for Inside Story, Sana'a.
Well, a report published by the Abad Center for Strategic Studies shows just how difficult a year 2014 was for Yemen. It found that at least 7,000 people were killed across the country. More than 1,000 were Yemeni troops and around 5,000 were Houthi rebels. The Houthis have seized military bases around the country, and the report says 70% of the army's capabilities are now under Houthi control. Let us now bring in our first guest for today's Inside Story, Osama Sari, Houthi journalist who now runs what was formerly a government newspaper, Al-Thawra, which is now under Houthi control. Welcome to Inside Story. Are the Houthis effectively running Yemen now?
I believe the reports that there is a political and security vacuum in Yemen are false, and also the reports that the Houthis are running the state's affairs. All these reports are untrue and baseless. There are still huge authorities and powers exercised by the President Abdullah Hadi and also the Prime Minister. What the Ansarullah doing on the Yemeni arena can in no circumstances be described as running the affairs of the country. They have simply formed vigilantes, popular group, to combat corruption across the state institution, as the entire country has been in a quagmire of corruption where billions of dollars from the resources of the countries have been gobbled up at the expense of average laymen. On the other hand, other state institutions have been totally crippled. That's why we have been forming groups to combat corruption what we see currently is a natural situation, unlike what is being falsely reported in the international mass media. Yemen is a stable country. Many state institutions are fully and totally functioning and operating. What is taking place, that media propaganda due to the overthrow of many corrupt officials who have been responsible for gobbling up the country's riches and the oil wells. Those or some of these figures, influential figures, have been overthrown. That's why they have resorted to the gray media organizations in order to propagate these false reports.
Let me ask you this question. Are the Houthis being directed, effectively controlled by Iran, as many people have suggested?
I emphasize and confirm to you again that these are all false, baseless reports. What Ansarullah are doing, the Houthis are doing on the domestic arena, is that they are seeking to reach the reins of power through proper channels. Many officials are settling scores. Even some forces within the Iranian government are taking advantage of the recent gains by Ansarullah to politicize them for their own domestic political agenda. I confirm that there is no intervention by Iran in our affairs by any way, shape, or form. Abdul Malik, the leader of Al-Houthi, is taking his own decisions out of his own free will, and he is not subjected to or influenced by or dictated to by any outside forces, including Iran.
If I may interrupt at this point, there are many people, experts in the affairs of Yemen for generations, who are suggesting that this is Iran on one side, with the Houthis as their proxy, and Saudi Arabia on the other side with the Sunni tribes and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula perhaps as part of their proxy, with both of these major powers in the Middle East vying for control of what they consider to be a strategically important country.
I believe Iran has no relevance to what is taking place in Yemen in whole or part. And the relations between Ansarullah and Saudi Arabia are good relations, flawless and unmarred. The recent armed confrontation between Ansarullah and what's called Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula also has no relevance. The same way, Iran has no relevance to the war waged against Al-Qaeda in any other country other than Yemen. I believe our armed confrontation with Al-Qaeda is like many of the Ansarullah followers in many provinces. We are just simply defending ourselves.
Let me ask you this, if I may, let me ask you this. If that is the case, if you simply want to, as you say, root out corruption, that you want to change what you believe to be long corrupt systems, why, when the Houthis said in 2014 that they would disarm, that they would go back to their villages, that they would lay down their weapons, why didn't they do that?
When Abdul Malik was demanded and Ansarullah were demanded by the Yemeni authorities to lay down arms, the aim was to disband and disarm them in order to use these arms against them. Last year, there was no state, total anarchy, total vacuum. Many militias affiliated to Al-Ahmar taking control of many of the military camps. If Houthis had laid down their arms, it would have been fallen in the hands of Al-Ahmar, who was directly fighting and targeting Al-Houthis. Ansarullah has no objection at all to lay down arms, as reiterated on many occasions. However, this cannot be achieved in the absence of a rule of law, established military institution where it take controls of the country's sovereignty and take charge of defending the homeland against any domestic or foreign enemies. This is what has been reiterated in the public Congress conference and the National Dialogue Conference, as the Houthis has expressed no objection even to lay down the heavy weaponry in their position.
Mr. Sari, I have to stop you there. The constraints of a recorded TV program mean I've got to now talk to some other people. But I wish you well, and thank you for your time. Let me now bring in the rest of our guests. Joining us from London, Mohammed Jumeh, Yemeni analyst who was a member of the National Conference in Yemen. And from Birmingham, Abu Bakr al-Shamaki, a freelance journalist, writer and blogger. Mr. Jumeh, let me ask you first of all, this dialogue, the National Conference, which the Houthis are now saying that they are dismissing out of hand, what was the problem as they see it?
Well, when we finished the National Conference in January last year, we agreed on a document, a very big document. It concluded all the issues which concern the country. And the Houthis were one party or one political group within the National Party who agreed on these articles of this document. I think from my point of view that the Houthis just wanted to invest in time by participating in the national dialogue, because they rejected now all that we agreed on, and they put like one hand in the national dialogue and the other hand on the arm.
But what is your assessment? What is your assessment of why they did that? Having agreed to it, why are they saying out of hand no now?
Because they didn't participate into the national conference with the intention to participate with the other political parties to build the political process again. They just participated in it, from my point of view, just to waste time and to invest in time for themselves.
So you believe they had an ulterior motive? So let me explore this now with our other guest, that is Abu Bakr al-Shamaki. If that is the case, that they were being, in a sense, duplicitous, and I don't know whether you agree with that, what is the relevance of the abandoning of the national dialogue as far as they're concerned, and where that might now take them?
Well, their argument is that, the abandonment of the, that they want to implement the outcomes of the national dialogue. And so when you speak to Houthis, they will say that's what they're trying to implement now, and that's what they're trying to do now. I think what's happening now with their expansion around into the rest of Yemen is a result of the circumstances. I think that they thought that taking Sana'a would be a lot harder than it turned out to be, and I think they're essentially kind of just seeing now how far they can go and how much they can do before there's some kind of heavy blowback.
And is this perhaps why they are suggesting
that
they might go into Marib province, which is oil-rich, gas-rich, they say, to protect it from unruly elements there, just to see what the reaction is, or do you think they might actually do that?
No, I mean, I would doubt that they would actually try and go into Marib province fully and try and take that over militarily, because it would be very difficult for them to do. Neighbouring Al-Jawf province, they spent a long time trying to take that over, and they've only now agreed some sort of deal with the local tribes where they have a semblance of a presence in Al-Jawf. Marib would be a lot harder to take over, and the tribes inside Marib, the Murad and the other tribes that are present in Marib would resist heavily any attempt by the Houthis, who they would see as invaders, to take over.
Mr. Jumeh, our guest from the Houthi cause categorically denied that this was in any way a proxy battle being waged, or struggle, if you like, between Iran on the one side and Saudi Arabia on the other. But there are those who pointed out that the Houthi tactics are very similar to those of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, Iranian-backed. What's your take on this? Is this a sort of regional struggle or just a national one?
I think it's a mixture of a national struggle and a regional struggle as well. If you look at the Houthi, the slogan of the Houthis is the Iranian slogan, death to America, death to Israel. That's in the slogan, but in fact it's death to the Yemenis, not to the American and Israelis. And we don't want death to anyone anyway. Iranians are there in Yemen. When the Houthis took over Sana'a, the Iranian ambassador came back to Yemen, although he wasn't in Sana'a for so many years. And when they took over Sana'a, the Jihan, the second, which is the ship which was filled with weapons, which was like seized in Aden, the crew of these ships were freed because of the pressure of the Houthis. There is a very strong bond between Iran and the Houthis, and even their weapons, their thoughts, their ideology, it's Iranian.
Let's explore this just a little bit further, if I may, with Mr. Al-Shamamahi. Saudi Arabia has a border with Yemen. Iran does not. It's across the water. Why does Yemen matter to Iran here?
Well, I think Iran would matter because of, as you've kind of touched on, the regional proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And, you know, Yemen is on the southern border of Saudi Arabia. It is in a very strategic position in terms of the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. Having said all that, I think actually the Saudis and the Iranians, their positions might not be too far apart on Yemen at the moment. Whereas, you know, it's quite easy to paint this as a simple Sunni versus Shia conflict, and therefore the sides are, you know, Saudi will pick the Sunni side and Iran will pick the Shia side. Actually, I think in Yemen right now, the Saudis would probably prefer the Houthis to be in charge on their border, as opposed to, say, Islah, which is the Muslim Brotherhood party in Yemen, or Al-Qaeda. You know, just because Al-Qaeda are Sunni does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that the Saudis are going to want them to be controlling their southern border.
Okay, well, that's very interesting, because that leads me to my next point. Mr. Jumi, let you ask you here. The former president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, always seemed to be very close to Saudi Arabia. He's now thought to be perhaps the power behind the Houthis. Is he looking for a return to power, and would he get the backing of a giant such as Saudi Arabia and perhaps even Iran in a strange sort of way?
Well, I think the former president, Mr. Saleh, is, from my point of view, the biggest ally of the Houthis nowadays. They came to Sana'a and they went to Taiz, they went to Damar and Ib and so many cities in Yemen because of his support and the former Republican Guards, which was controlled by his son. And so many commanders in this division are still Saleh's ally. Mr. Saleh told the Saudis that the Houthis will come to Sana'a just to defeat the Muslim Brotherhood, which is regionally okay for the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. But after that, they came to Sana'a and they went to the south of Sana'a and the south cities in Taiz and in Ib, which make the Saudis concerned.
Try and explore his position here. Do you think he's looking for the chance to be president again? I mean, he's been told by Jamal bin Omar, who is the UN Special Envoy to Yemen, that all of the deals that have been thrashed out do not prevent him from running for the presidency again. Is that what he wants?
No, I don't think Saleh wants to come back to power. He for sure, he knows that he will not. He will never come back to power. But he wants some sort of arrangement for his son and his family. I think there are some talks in Yemen that his son, Mr. Ahmad, will be the named person for the new elections, the coming elections in 2015, maybe this year. But anyway, Mr. Saleh wants to play with the Houthis as his strong card. And on the other hand, the Houthis want to play with Mr. Saleh as their own card. But who will end as a card and who will end as a player? This is a difficult question to be answered now.
OK, let me come back to you, Mr. Al-Shamahi, in our Birmingham studio. Ali Abdullah Saleh is a man that many people outside of Yemen might have imagined had melted into the background. We've discussed the fact that he hasn't. What sort of following, I wonder, does he still have in Yemen? He obviously has a pretty high opinion of himself, having opened up a museum that's got a pair of his sort of badly burnt trousers from when somebody tried to assassinate him, bits of shrapnel that were taken from his body. He clearly thinks he's still a major player there.
Well, Saleh's a wily character. And he still is relatively popular in Sana'a and in other parts of Yemen. If you go to Sana'a, you'll see many pictures. Usually people are quite surprised at this. They'll see pictures of Saleh and his son, Ahmed Ali, being presented, you know, as these heroes of the country. Saleh calls himself the leader, and he's called that by his followers on the many media outlets that he owns. And he was able to, you know, for example, the government that existed in Yemen since 2011 was a national unity government. Yet Saleh and his media were clever enough to present that government as being one solely built on the opposition to him, despite him actually controlling half of the ministries in that. And so the failure of that government was then put on the opposition, rather than being a shared failure of both the opposition, or the former opposition to Saleh, and himself. So he's still a major player, and I think he's kind of waiting now for his chance, maybe him or, as has been said, his son, to present themselves as the saviour of the Yemeni people in a year or two, maybe.
And Mr. Jummeh, if that does come about, what about the fragmentation of Yemen, whether it comes about or not? Saleh's return to power, or his son. What about the fragmentation of Yemen? It was suggested federalising the country, 6 different provinces, but we have a big secessionist movement in the south, particularly southern Herat, which is a group that wanted to go back to sort of pre-1990 days when there was a north and a south. Is there any way to put it all back in the bottle and calm the situation in Yemen, or has it gone too far for that?
Well, I think this is the question nowadays. They are discussing the constitutions of the new state in Yemen, and the agreement in the National Dialogue Conference was to divide the country into 6 regional states. Now the Houthis and the southern movement, they don't want this to happen. It's very difficult because the Houthis is the main power now in the south, and
but is it your thought that there will be, if not the 6 federal states, then there will eventually be, as there was before, a North Yemen and a South Yemen?
That's what the southern separatists want. They want 2 regional states, but they want more than that. They want to have their own state, in a certain amount of time. In few years at the end of the day, because they want to get their own state. The problem now is the central government is very weak, and it's controlled by the Houthis, and the president is just by the name.
So let me put that point
is a president, and even
to Mr. Al-Shamahi. We've heard that this is what they want. Will they get it, those people who want to secede in the south? Is the fragmentation, the splitting up of Yemen, inevitable or not?
Well, I'd say if it were based, if there was a vote tomorrow in the south on whether they wanted to secede, that vote would probably be yes, and we'd have a South and North Yemen. But it's not as simple as that. And there's been, or there have been, numerous opportunities for the south over the last few years, based on the kind of the near anarchy that exists in Yemen, the numerous crises that have happened for them to secede, and that's not happened yet. And I think that's an important point, and that points to perhaps them, the secessionists and their leaders being very divided.
So what is it going to take, briefly if you would, what is it going to take to calm it down so that there is not all-out civil war in Yemen?
I'm not sure if there even, if there even will be all-out civil war. Yemen always, the cliche, it always seems to get to the brink and then pull back. in terms of what would maybe change the situation in the south to make them more amenable to Yemeni unity, you'd be looking at massive changes in terms of the way the government works and the way the government rules, and that in the north and the south. And right now, with the control of the Houthis over numerous different provinces, with so many different forces trying to fight over and control the country, concrete changes don't seem to be coming anytime soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Both of our guests we've seen there, Mohammed Jumae in London, Abu Bakr al-Shamahi in Birmingham, and our thanks earlier to Osama Sari, who joined us at the beginning of the programme. Let us know your thoughts about this show, or indeed any other edition of Inside Story. You can post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or contact us on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, David Foster, from the entire team on Inside Story, thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.